We here at WKAR exist to serve Mid-Michigan with trusted journalism and local programming. Federal funding has been eliminated, which means community support is critical to sustaining this service and helping WKAR meet evolving community needs. Your ongoing support ensures public media remains freely available and locally focused. Become a sustaining member or upgrade your current gift today. Sustain what matters. Build what's next.
OTR coming up next with Wendy Block from a coalition of groups opposing the statewide vote to rewrite the state constitution. So sit in with us as we get the inside out, off the record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. And now, this edition of Off the Record with Tim Skubic.
Thank you very much. Welcome to Studio C for another edition of Off the Record on this important weekend with the Republican convention coming up. But the doctors, 8,000 of them, Simon, got what they wanted, a reprieve.
Yeah, this is just the renewal of a physician's licensing compact that allows people who are medically certified in other states to practice in Michigan. We could have lost thousands of doctors had this not been renewed. But this is one of those issues where you have candidates in marginal districts, people in competitive legislative seats who really want to get their name on an important law before they go up for re-election. And then there was a huge spat over that.
The Senate Democratic leader has been critical of the speaker on this could have been done last year. She was, quote, dismayed.
I mean, I think it was a standoff that did not have to happen. And I think anybody looking at it with an objective eye, in normal everyday life in Michigan would be pretty disgusted by it, that it took until down to the wire to pass a very routine bill just to allow out-of-state doctors to work in Michigan.
As you guys know, for months, Mr. Hall has been taking on Ms. Brinks, right, in a critical manner. We sat down with her the other day, and she sort of returned the volley. Let's listen to her and then the speaker. After Republican Speaker Matt Hall and Senate Democratic leader Winnie Brinks shook hands on that bipartisan deal last week, Speaker Hall was upbeat about the future.
I think it's a good reason to be optimistic about the future.
But Senator Brinks, not so much.
That's really up to him.
Senator Brinks is critical of the manner in which she says the Speaker is running the Michigan House.
With the House operating under Speaker Hall, he seems to think that everything needs to be a problem that he can then claim that he solves. And so it makes it really difficult to get things done for the people of Michigan.
She notes he says a lot of things, but
if the things that he would like to work on were backed up by action, not just words, it would be a very good sign for things to come. But the way things have gone with this speaker, it's one day at a time. But we continue to be ready to work together to get a budget done on time and responsibly.
The Democratic leader alleges that he is creating, quote, barriers in what should be normal legislative relationships, with this alleged endgame in mind.
Instead, we've got, a caucus over in the House that's really hell-bent on doing as little as possible.
So is she upbeat about things changing?
I don't anticipate that that's going to change drastically.
6 News has reached out to the Speaker for a response.
I was surprised that to see her so negative in her comments.
Democratic Senate leader Winnie Brinks argues that Speaker Matt Hall, a Republican, wants to create problems in the legislative process and then take credit for resolving them. The Speaker rejects that notion. He feels he is working well with the Democratic governor and, quote, I've gotten lots of stuff done, end quote. But he also observes that trying to work a deal with Ms. Brinks, on the other hand, well, it leaves something to be desired, he says.
I think we have to give her a little bit of grace here. She's representing a group of very radical people in the Senate Democrat caucus. And I think it's hard for her to identify what exactly it is that she wants often.
Speaker Hall reports that in the past, he and former Democratic Speaker Joe Taylor He tried to work out deals, only to send them to the Senate under Ms. Brinks' control, where they failed.
There's one common denominator. It's Winnie Brinks.
But he also credits Ms. Brinks for putting up a controversial vote that none of her colleagues wanted to vote on. Meanwhile, Senator Brinks retorts that the Speaker is, quote, hell-bent on doing as little as possible. And he comes back, that's because some of the legislation Democrats want is not meaningful to taxpayers.
Working on things that are consequential, that are meaningful, that make a difference to people, and we're cutting out all this stupid stuff.
Ms. Briggs says she does want to work with the Speaker in the future to get the budget done on time, and she contends that really depends on him on whether that happens.
I agree with her. I mean, it is up to me. And part of the reason for that is, I'm really the main leader in the legislature.
Mr. Hall, in essence, rejects all of her criticisms and has this advice for her.
Maybe she should take some time over the spring break and relax a little, because we're doing some great work.
Mr. Ballinger, why are you laughing, sir?
Well, there's a lot of fear and loathing between Winnie Brinks and Matt Hall. I mean, this is not like the good old days where you had Democratic leaders like Bob Emerson and John Cherry, and you had Republicans like Ken Sikkema and Dan DeGrow. These guys could get along. These two people loathe each other, and Winnie Brinks finally bit back after Hall had relentlessly battered her.
He has about a 9-month advantage on her, right?
Yeah, at least that much.
Yeah.
And so they finally got this deal done on this bill. It should have been a no-brainer, done a long time ago. And it would have been done in the past, I'm pretty sure, if those leaders of the past were still in place, but they're not.
Ms. LeBlanc, your reaction to her particularly?
I mean, I actually think I've heard stronger from her in the past. I think when Republicans last December said or cut a ton from the budget, she said there was a special place in hell for folks who cut funding for one particular program that benefited newborn infants. And she, so I mean, this was obviously very strong. She's obviously getting pretty frustrated about this. That issue with the doctor's licensing was one that did not need to happen, and it bodes pretty poorly for the budgeting process if they can't even get a doctor's licensing bill through without that kind of drama around it.
I mean, when you build your political, or you're attempting to build your political brand, as Speaker Hall has, on sort of disrupting the status quo and sort of ending politics as usual, that means that you're also disrupting the parts of this town that sort of have worked relatively well over the past few years. The work that Governor Whitmer has put in to sort of have a good working relationship with a Republican-dominated legislature in her first term. That was something that, having a functional relationship where people have open avenues of communication and can sort of work to get things done, that's a little bit difficult to preserve when Matt Hall has decided that he wants to make himself a vital component of every conversation that happens in the legislature.
All right, let's talk about polling data. We got the governor's race, and appears reliable independent source claiming this race is now a dead heat between two guys.
Yeah, exactly. Perry Johnson and John James. I mean, this is the first poll that has been taken since this avalanche of TV ads and media blitz began on January 26th, and it's going to extend until April 7th, by Perry Johnson. $13.5 million being spent on media, unprecedented. And before Johnson entered the race and started this media blitz, James was way ahead in every poll that had ever been taken, ahead of Mike Cox and Eric Nesbitt and Tom Leonard. Now, this is the first time we've seen a poll after the media blitz with Johnson in the race, and it's James 23%, Johnson 20%, so within the margin of error. Cox way behind 6%, Nesbitt 5%, Leonard 3%. So I think it's looking like it's going to boil down to a two-man race at this point, but there are 4 months to go and anything can happen.
What do you make of those numbers?
Yeah, I mean, I think like Bill said, there's still 4 months to go, and we know from Michigan elections past that things are unpredictable here in terms of primaries and then in generals too. But I do think right now, I mean, I think it's a reflection not just of outspending by Perry Johnson, but also the fact that he is showing up at events. I think John James has made a decision for some events so far not to show up there. I think it's being noticed by grassroots Republicans, and even further out than that, like you just get less face time if you don't show up at these events. And so I think even people who aren't, totally plugged into the primary or what's happening in these races, they see Perry Johnson's face more. So there's going to be more recognition there.
Yeah, I think as Beth noted, of course, primaries are primarily about name ID. You want to make sure that the people who are voting in your primary know who you are and sort of, at least in vague terms, what you want to do. And that's exactly what Perry Johnson's been doing with all these ads. It's a 30-second spot where he's essentially saying, one policy proposal that he has, regardless of how realistic or plausible they may be. And he's, clearly has the personal wealth to sustain this sort of ad blitz. And we should note that this is an extraordinary amount of money. In 2022, Gretchen Whitmer raised about $40 million throughout the course of her campaign. He pledged $10 million in ad spending in March. Well, I can't confirm that that's the amount that he spent. It's what his campaign has said he's going to spend. And so, that's really going to take you a long way in a primary like this. John James has really benefited from the fact that he's had 2 statewide campaigns already for people to learn who he is and what he's about.
And Mr. Johnson, though, is making an issue out of that he's a 2-time loser. Yeah. Which I know that just drives the James people nuts because, he improved on his test scores as the game went on. But all these guys apparently are going to show up at the convention and work the floor, huh?
Well, Johnson certainly is. I don't know about James. As Beth pointed out, James has been a no-show at many Republican events. He started to pick it up a little bit once Johnson entered the race and he realized he's going to have some competition. We'll see what happens.
And what about the U.S. Senate race? Is that close?
U.S. Senate race, there's some polls coming out, dueling polls by Mallory McMorrow, the state senator, and Haley Stevens, the U.S. representative. And each one shows herself ahead. But they're tight. And Abdel El-Sayed is right behind. I mean, these three are close together in fundraising and in polling strength. And there are 4 months to go, again, until the primary there. So anything could happen in that race. The Democrat side of the U.S. Senate race is turbulent. The Republican side is pretty much settled with Mike Rogers, the almost certain nominee.
If you're a Republican running for any office and you're looking at your president and the problems that he's currently having, what are you thinking?
I really hope that those gas prices go down between now and November, more or less. I mean, if it has been the Democratic game plan for nigh on a year now to talk about sort of affordability as the main issue. And when the Strait of Hormuz off the coast of Iran remains closed and there's not oil flowing, then that's going to be a lot tougher sell, especially as we see we have a petroleum-based economy in many other fields beyond just filling up your car. And we're going to see those cascading effects, and it's going to be more difficult.
But if you're running for a Michigan House seat, the gas prices are not one of the issues that's part of the legislative process.
Look, what happens nationally can have a big impact on Michigan. 2006, 20 years ago, was a very bad midterm special election for George H.W. Bush, and the Republicans took a bath here in Michigan. They lost control of the House, and they almost lost control of the state Senate. So it can have an impact on races here in Michigan. And if Trump remains right now at 36%, which is the most recent poll, Republicans are going to take a bath in November, and it's going to affect all these races, and they're going to lose control of the House as a majority party.
And I think a lot of people are voting straight ticket at the end of the day, too. So if they're ticked off with a Republican at the top of the ticket, and his or her connections to Trump, it's going to affect those down the ballot as well.
Yeah. Well, there should be an interesting convention this weekend. We'll see who shows up and who doesn't. Let's show up now with Wendy Block, who is from the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. But Wendy, you're working for an organization which is urging Michigan voters to vote no on rewriting the Constitution. Let me ask you this question. Are you concerned that it may pass, or are you afraid it may pass?
We definitely have concerns about it being passed, right? We are living in a time right now where I think a lot of people just don't like the status quo. And so when people are presented with this idea of whether we want to fully rewrite the Michigan Constitution or do so in part. We think voters, if they aren't educated about the issue, might say, that sounds like a good idea. But we believe that there are many risks involved with calling for a constitutional convention, and that voters need to be aware of the reasons that they might want to consider voting no on Proposal 1 of 2026, this automatic question that appears on the Michigan ballot every 16 years.
So what's the worst thing that could happen from a business standpoint?
Well, if voters decide to call for a constitutional convention, or a con, as we call it, we just think a lot of chaos is going to ensue, right? We're going to elect 148 delegates to redraw the Michigan Constitution, and they can look at any number of issues. They can basically put anything into the Constitution. They can throw away the current Constitution and completely start over. So we are really concerned about the uncertainty that this will create for Michigan businesses and families. If you think about it, so in this legislative session alone, we're about 15 months in, over 2,700 bills have been introduced. That's 2,700 different ideas just in the legislature alone. And then you start adding this kind of citizen component on top of it. We think this could take years. It could result in a lot of gridlock and just big questions for the future of Michigan.
Wendy, who is behind your effort and your organization? What do you consist of? Are you bipartisan, nonpartisan, what?
Yeah, so our coalition is just getting off the ground, but it is a very broad and diverse coalition. And you might say, wait, the Michigan Chamber is involved with some of these other groups on opposing a con? And the answer is yes. So we have teamed up with groups like the AFL-CIO, the Michigan Education Association, the League of Conservation Voters, Business Leaders for Michigan, and we would expect many other groups of different political persuasions to be joining us moving forward.
Why did you feel this time was so important to organize like this? I mean, I remember the 3 previous votes on this. I don't remember an organization getting involved, opposing it, and those all got creamed by huge margins. Why is it going to be any different this time?
Yeah, so actually, we have a very long organizational history of opposing a con. This has gone down by about 70% of the vote every time it's gone to Michigan voters. But that has happened because groups like the Michigan Chamber have been committed to educating our members as well as the general public about the risks and the dangers involved with this process. So this is no different for us, and certainly for many of the other groups that are involved with us this round.
I was really interested in seeing the announcement of your coalition, given how, as you noted, broad and diverse it is, to see the Michigan Chamber partner with, I believe, the League of Conservation Voters, for example, who often find themselves on the opposite side of a huge number of issues. What are you going to say to critics of this effort, that this is just simply an effort by the professional political class to rally together and preserve the status quo?
Yeah, so we hope that people will take note of the broadness of this coalition, right? We are in a time right now where there's a lot of political polarization, and we're hopeful that voters will lift up their heads when they see that business and labor and other interest groups have come together to oppose a con. So certainly, this is a broad tent, big tent effort, and it needs to be, just so people from all different political persuasions understand. But what I would say is, to people who might say, well, special interests, right? We are a special interest for Michigan in general. We believe in a strong and healthy business climate. We believe that a strong and healthy business climate lifts up families and communities. So, we're not afraid of being called a special interest in this regard, because we think we're a special interest for Michigan.
But Wendy, I guess underlining what Simon was saying there, folks can look at the business groups, folks can look at the unions and say, depending on which party is in power, those groups hold tremendous sway. Of course, they would want to protect the status quo. That's why we need to have a con. I guess, what do you say to that? Is there a danger in you guys kind of joining together and showing this united front?
I suppose possibly, but again, if we aren't willing to speak out about the concerns related to this, voters aren't going to understand what is at stake. And what I would tell voters is that there already is a process today in our current Constitution to amend the Constitution. So since our last Constitution was enacted by a con, the Constitution has been amended 39 times. 49 proposed amendments have been rejected. So there is a process today to improve our Constitution. We do not need to throw the whole thing in the garbage to start over or to make changes or to improve it, regardless of which side you're on, what kinds of issues you want to see added or removed from the Constitution.
Yeah, but here's your problem. 30 years ago, nobody wanted to throw garbage in the system, but today they do.
Yeah. But, there's risks and rewards for both sides on this issue, right? So again, going back to those 2,700 bills that have been introduced in the legislative session just to date, right? You think about the types of topics that could be proposed at a con and the types of things, right? We might have tax cuts. We might have tax increases. We might have more environmental regulations. We might have less. We might have more employment laws. We might have less. This is a high stakes game. You don't know who these 148 delegates are going to be and why they put their name in the hat to say, I want to be elected as a con delegate. What kind of special interests are they bringing to the table? What kind of single cause activism type issues are they going to be pushing? So I would caution people who think that maybe it couldn't get worse. Might it? I think
when you talk about both sides, is there another side? Is there a group supporting a con or number groups that you fear? Could they wreak some havoc and upend the apple cart?
Well, we've certainly heard from some legislators that they're interested in a con, both current and former legislators. I think they're interested by this academic exercise, right? Like, ooh, what can we get, right? What can we do? And again, high risk, high reward. In terms of a formal group supporting a con, we've heard whispers that there might be a group forming, but so far we haven't seen anything publicly.
You would expect the abortion people to be in there, the anti-abortion folks, don't you?
Yeah, good question. We're not really sure how groups might come out. It's still early days, right? We're still several months away from the November election. And so I think different groups like the Michigan Chamber and those that maybe are on the other side, if you will, are currently going through their process and trying to figure out with their members where they want to land on this. But when we put this issue to our members, and we represent about 5,000 businesses across our great state, our members represent about 1 million Michigan workers, they kind of took a look at this and said, we should oppose.
Is the group, are you guys, do you have a dollar amount that you want everybody to kick in?
At this point, we're just kind of in the public awareness phase of things. So that's why I'm here today at 8 o'clock in the morning talking to all of you.
Yeah, but do you have a budget? How much are you going to spend? How much are you going to spend on this? You have a budget?
TBD. And I can't speak for the formal coalition, but I can speak for us in that we are going to look at resources and going to do what it takes to get the word out on the dangers of this proposal.
I'm curious, you said high risk and high reward. What do you see as a major risk should a con happen and we see a new constitution come before voters? Are you talking about higher taxes, more regulation?
Yeah, exactly. Try to kind of spell that out there a little bit. But, tax issues obviously are in our Constitution today. So you could see delegates putting on the table new taxes. You could see some pushing for tax cuts. What does that end up looking like? What sorts of regulations might people want to put into the Constitution? Do you have an elected or an appointed judiciary? How do you govern our state's universities? There's so many issues that could end up in the Constitution. Really, this unfettered authority for these 148 delegates to decide what goes into a new Constitution.
But you like our tax system as it exists today?
We're certainly saying that the current Constitution is not perfect. But frankly, if we want to change that, there is a process to changing that today.
I'm curious, let's say what you fear comes to pass and a con is approved. What do you envision for the battle, first, of the election of constitutional delegates, and then the second for ratification?
Yeah, so the process here is really interesting, right? So if voters say yes to proposal 1 on November 3 of 2026, which of course we hope they will say no and put this issue to bed for the next 16 years. But if assuming they say yes, the first step is for voters to pick these 148 delegates, 1 delegate from every state house and every state Senate district. And that needs to happen by May of 2027. They will need to convene the CON to start drafting a new constitution by October of 2027. But from there, the process really is undefined, right? They will need to govern themselves, and they really have no deadline by which they need to complete a new constitution. So there becomes questions about what happens with the legislature during this time. Are they put on the sidelines during that process? Because anything they do, the CON might say, well, we didn't like that. Now we're going to write the other side into the Constitution. So really, big questions about the legislative process during this time. But ultimately, to Simon's question, voters will need to decide by a simple majority vote whether or not they want to approve the work of a CON. But when that would happen is still very much a question mark.
But Wendy, the last time this happened, like 61, 62, I mean, first of all, the thing barely passed by 7,000 votes statewide. Right. And, the legislature functioned perfectly well while the CON was going on. There was no huge breakdown of government during this time. Why is it going to be any different this time?
Well, I would argue that the political climate in the 1960s is very different than the political climate today, where people are very polarized. So that very well may be true, and we would hope that does ring true in 2026, 2027, but you never know what might happen. Again, back to this is going to create a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion, a lot of questions, and that's why we think voters should vote no on Proposal 1 of 2026.
And on that note, you owe me one, right? They put a face on the last one in 61, George Romney. Are you guys going to get a spokesperson who's going to be the face of this campaign, yay or nay?
TBD.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Ms. Block. Nice to have you on board. Also, our panel. See you next week with more Off the Record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. For more Off the Record, visit WKAR.org. Michigan public television stations have contributed to the production costs of Off the Record.